Dylan, good morning. Thank you very much for joining me. How are you doing?
We are in the morning. Good morning. How are you? Yeah, I'm good, man. Thanks. Yeah, sun's shining after about 2 weeks of rain down here in the south, mate.
I've just checked the weather forecast actually, and I think things are looking up. I think things are looking up because it has been about a month of just misery, and I think it was well timed as everybody just started to think lockdown's easing, weather's improving, everything's getting better, and then boom,
Pub gardens back open.
Yeah, rain and grey. But I'm going to kick things off by asking, in a sentence, who is Dylan Hartley?
Oh man, geez, you're supposed to ease me into this. Who am I? Geez, I know. I asked myself that quite a bit. I've had to ask myself that recently. Obviously, retiring from pro sport where I was institutionalised. Then you wake up and you take off your tracksuit and you look in the mirror and you think, who am I? What are my hobbies? What are my interests? What are my drivers? What are my passions? What do I love doing? What do I hate doing? So I've been through that, and I can't probably put that in one sentence for you. I'm very sorry.
No, that's quite right. It's just a little tactic to get you thinking about what direction we're going to go in. But it's something I wrestle with often as well. So I like to ask guests just to see how much we can distill down the nature of the person at the other end. But I think we're going to kick off with just a bit of the origin story of how you ended up where you are, growing up in rural New Zealand, across to England at teenage years for an exchange, and how you ultimately ended up becoming the captain of England for the length that you did.
Yeah, right, the roots of that. Jeez. What do you want to know? Early years or teenage years?
Just the key points of what you think the important stages of your upbringing that made you the person you are today.
Okay, I reckon 10 years old. My dad, and this coupled with the 1995 Rugby World Cup and Jonah Lomu, being from New Zealand, farm kid living in New Zealand, went to rural school. My dad was a builder. He worked 7 days a week. We never got presents or gifts unless it was your birthday or Christmas, Whereas, I look at my kid every day, she bloody gets something, it feels like. Well, I've got two kids, don't forget the other one. Jeez. But my dad, 1995, 10 years old, came home with a basketball for my elder brother, a soccer ball for my little brother. He brought me a rugby ball, 1995 World Cup rugby ball. And I think that kind of started an obsession, and I coupled that at 10 years old at primary school. Every lunchtime in New Zealand, every playtime, before school, after school, we played rugby. We played touch rugby, we played contact rugby, we played passes, kicks, whatever, we played rugby. So an obsession with a rugby ball at 10 years old, coupled with enjoying playing the game with my friends. And that same year, I joined my first rugby club at 10 years old. So I think the obsession with rugby and the ball in particular, I took it with me everywhere. I was always practicing with it. All the unnecessary things that I would never end up doing, like place kicking and drop goals and spinning a ball on my finger and doing stupid things with it, you know what I mean? But I think 10 years old, that was formative for me. That was an inspirational sort of gift from my dad. And then you're watching Jonah Lomu, who kind of burst onto the scene at 19 years old, was this global kind of superstar icon. And, I remember being at school, 10 years old, passing a ball in a circle, everyone's saying that they were Jonah Lomu, but, reality soon kicked in that I wasn't Jonah Lomu.
I think that reality kicked in for a generation of rugby players, to be fair.
That's what he was. That's what I'll remember him for, is just inspiring not just one generation, many a generation. Then I suppose fast forward a couple of years, I was quite good at the game. I was quite a big sort of farm kid. Hadn't found the canteen just yet, so I wasn't as chubby as I am now. But I was quite good at the game, and I suppose big fish in a little pond in the rural school. Went into the inner city sort of middle school, and that changed things a bit. I wasn't as good as I thought. I remember missing out on the first 15 and not crying, but being pretty upset about it, I think there was only like 2 or 3 kids that missed out. So it was pretty soul destroying, and I thought I was good. But I remember then I went home at 13, 14, and I started running and stuff like that. So I started creating like these things, like just training in my own time. I didn't know what I was doing, but I'd go for like a 2K, 3K run or a jog, because that's all I knew what to do. So I think that was also quite formative, and kind of like that setback of not being good enough, and the sort of, especially coming from a rural school into town, trying to make friends and be accepted where I didn't know anyone. I think sport was a great sort of vehicle for that, to make friends, because once you're in a team, it's like you adopt a family effectively, and you've got a friendship group. So I think that was kind of formative in the aspect of not being good enough, being told you weren't good enough, and then finding a way to become better. So that was formative. And then going into senior school, I was always a year young. I always played a year young. All my peer group were older. I don't know how the school year worked, but I was the youngest, so I always played a year ahead. And I think, looking back at it, that was good for me. So I was always playing against bigger, better, faster people, and I wasn't, again, quite good enough. So I was always, scrambling to keep my head above water effectively. But I think that paid dividends in, a couple of years playing. I stuck at it. And I went to quite a very good rugby school, a prestigious sort of state school in Rotorua. National finalists for, a couple of times in a decade. Won the trophy a couple of times in a decade as well. So a really good rugby school that produced All Blacks and whatnot. But if I looked at the first 15 I played in, I was way down the pecking order in terms of my talent or ability at that stage, I suppose. And the other thing, and we caught up just off air before, is I didn't really apply myself academically at school. And I think that's down to me not applying myself, but also the school being pretty lax on its standards towards education, maybe. Because they use sport as a driver to achieve, they want the students to achieve through whatever means, and sport was, and again rugby culturally is pretty significant. So our headmaster was basically our first 15 coach. So as long as rugby was going good, it wouldn't really matter if the school stuff fell on the back burner. So there was no pressure there, but there's a pressure from home, from mum and dad, for me to do better at school. And then one day I was sat there in form class. I don't know what they call it now. At the start of the day, newsletter comes around, and there's a school exchange in there, and I thought, that looks good. I can finish a rugby season, go to America or England for 6 months, avoid, I suppose, the formalities of the equivalent of GCSEs at the time, 15, 16. And then I'll come back for next year's rugby season. So I'll go on a bit of a holiday, a bit of a jolly overseas, go have a bit of crack, and then I'll come back and play rugby. So I inquired about that, and it turned out it was going to be thousands and thousands of dollars and pounds. So that kind of fizzled out pretty quick. And then my uncle, who lives in the southeast of England, just said, "Why don't you come live with us? I've got a British passport." My mum at 10 years old took me down the shops, got my photo done, and said, "You'll thank me for this one day." And I do thank her for that. So I got my British passport, and I basically moved in with my auntie and uncle. I had 2 cousins, and I went to the local school. So again, that was probably the most formative thing in my life so far, the decision at 16 to basically escape school for 6 months. And go to a different school over here in England. And it was just a community college. I brought my rugby boots. It had a rugby academy. There's a local rugby club. So I kind of, that's how I got here. Sorry, it's a bit of a long-winded way of getting here, but I suppose that is the most a crossroads in my life. If I hadn't have done that, I would have continued to stay in New Zealand. Probably not quite cut the mustard with my rugby. Is that a saying? Cut the mustard? Have I just made that up?
No, I think it made sense to me. So I think if we just confidently move forwards, then yes is the answer. Yeah,
I could have stayed there, and I suppose the other option was, what I did know kind of manual work or labour with my dad. Every school holidays, 14, 15, 16, I would go to the sawmill where my dad worked, and I would help him do jobs. And I don't think that would pass with health and safety these days, but it seemed to work back then. New Zealand's about 50 years behind anyway, so it's still like the 80s back there right now. But so my other option would have been to go on the tools or get a trade, do an apprenticeship or something like that. So I avoided that by basically escaping to England for 6 months. And
the
my mum and
catalyst
dad,
for a successful rugby career was avoiding your exams. I think there's several ways we can take that as a lesson, but it's just another example of how all these little decisions we make can stack up over time, isn't it? And it's fascinating to hear. And then you went back to New Zealand after that, didn't you? And then you got invited back for England under 19s and never left from that point.
I think that was the biggest decision. I had my jolly over here. Rugby went really well. I went through your kind of your school system here, and I think being a Kiwi abroad and playing rugby, you might stand out because of your accent, and I looked a bit different. And especially, I came from what I'd call a blue collar kind of background, and the way that, I don't know, the aggressive nature or the rugby system that I came from, it was almost a semi-professional environment. So then going to the southeast of England, and we can call them southern softies, it's all right, because I've lived with those people and they're my friends. But I think I just stood out, whereas in New Zealand you're just another kid, and there's lots of kids that are good at rugby, but I had a little bit more about me than the kids in London southeast, So maybe I stood out, and that's how I got my opportunity. So I got an invite to come back, and I think that was, I said the last flight was my biggest one, but this was the biggest one. It was the one-way ticket. Mum and Dad forked out, I don't know how much it was, but it's not a cheap flight. And I got on that plane, and I kind of set out on a mission to become a professional rugby player, because off the back of that, it was only a 2-week tour in Cape Town with England under 19s, So I got invited to that, but I had nowhere to go when I came back. So I just emailed the Worcester Rugby Academy and said, can I join here? And they said, yeah, we can work something out, just come on down type thing. It's not just like I was popping down for the day. I had literally my backpack with my life's possessions in it. And they managed to kind of sort me out some fuel expenses that we doctored. I was doing a couple hundred mile round trip at one point to get a few £100 a month and they put me up in student halls, which is good. But the promise of a contract kind of came through, and I signed my first professional contract at 17, 18, I think, and it's about $4,000 a year. I know exactly how much it was, and it was $4,000 a year, and I had to pay rent of £250 a month, and that left me with £83 left for the month, so about £21 a week to live off. And I tell you what, when you're a full-time professional rugby player and you got £21 a week to eat, socialise, just live off, it was near impossible. But it made me thrifty, I kind of laugh, but I used to pick up coppers off the floor, and I used to catch the bus everywhere, and I'd walk everywhere, and I'd steal stuff. Like, I'm sure you've heard the story before, but I used to steal, if anyone left kit lying around, I'd have it, and I'd sell it on eBay. And the club we played at had a convention centre, so it had a kind of commercial kitchen, so like bog roll, eggs, milk, ham off the bone. I remember taking mini desserts, like yogurts. I pilfered the place, but I wasn't the only one. But I won't rat my mates out. But we were kind of I called the chapter in my book The Lost Boys. We were all kind of like a motley crew, and we're just finding a way to get by. But I suppose the best thing and the worst thing, there's two ways to look at this. It was formative in the respect of I had 2 years from 17 till 19 living by myself, being thrifty, finding out how to earn money, finding out how to train, having a real hunger to become, proper professional, not $4,000 a year professional. And it wasn't quite happening for me at Worcester. I was still within that England sort of age group thing. And, I had counterparts or teammates when I went away with England, and these guys were out of school on 20, 30 grand. And I was like, fuck, how do I do that? So I approached Northampton on a Monday night after we played them, I said to the coach, can I come here? Just like I said to Worcester, can I come here? I said to Northampton, can I come here? And they said, we can make that work, you know. So they said, can we do anything in the meantime to help you out? And I said, I'm just struggling financially, you know. I wasn't telling lies. I needed some help. And they sent me a cheque for 1,500 quid, which I'm sure is highly illegal. I'm sure it's poaching, but this is back in 2005.
Yeah, it's probably like relatively winning the lottery for you at the time, from 21 quid a week to 1,500. I can imagine that's bottles of Moët going all over the place.
That was exactly it. You've obviously done your homework. But we went out that night and we actually drank Moët and bought an iPod. And
that was accidental homework there. I didn't. That's just how I would have done it. So great minds think alike, eh?
No, it's 100% the truth. We went out and did that. But I think what that did is when I moved to Northampton, they doubled my salary. And then when I turned up there, I got a free house, so I didn't have to pay for rent. I got a free meat pack every week. So I got free meat, got free veg box, I got free boots, free trainers, and I doubled my salary and I didn't have anything to spend it on. So at that moment, I arrived at Northampton and they said, you know, go for it. And that kind of allowed me not to worry about earning money. So when I was at Worcester, I worked in the evenings. I did everything from like cleaning gutters to glass collecting in nightclubs to leaflet and pamphlet kind of deliveries in the day in between. You know, train in the morning and then train in the afternoon in between. I was probably racking up 20,000 steps delivering bloody pamphlets. But, you know, I did all sorts of stuff. But when I got to Northampton, it kind of freed me up. And this means nothing to anyone else, but I talk about it in my book. There's a time when I was at Worcester and I had to ring my mum and dad because my boots had broken. And at 21 quid a week, I would have to save, not eaten anything for 1.5 months or done anything, and saved up, you know, my 190 quid, whatever it is, to buy a good pair of boots these days. And I tried everything. I duct taped them up. I'd done everything. And even our coach gave me a pair of size 13s and I'm a size 11. I tried wearing those, just couldn't do it. And my boots just like disintegrated. And it was almost like the walk of shame, walking down to the local corner shop, going into the phone box, putting the coins in, ringing mum and saying, can I have some money please? And I felt so embarrassed at doing that. And I was only 17, 18 years old at the time, but I'd set off on that journey to become the professional rugby player, and I was in their eyes because I told mum at Worcester and I get paid. But mum, can I have some money please to buy some boots just so I can basically ply my trade? And that for me was like an embarrassing moment, and I felt like I'd failed because I couldn't provide for myself. And again, when I compare it to then moving to Northampton where I got a free pair of boots and shoes, on arrival it was like, and I was getting paid double my salary. I felt like I, again, won the lottery, but it freed me up to focus on becoming a professional rugby player. So that experience at Worcester was, it put me in good, it just prepared me for what was to come. And I found, because I'd been cutting my teeth down in Worcester, which was a lower club, a championship club, proper, again, blue collar sort of training sort of style that we had. It was very spit and sawdust. I then turned up to Northampton, which is quite a polished kind of Premiership club, and my academy counterparts that I came in with were just leaving boarding school or leaving the nest. You know, mummy and daddy dropped them off Saturday, Sunday. They'd go home and they'd spend birthdays, Christmases at home. They'd get their laundry done. They'd come back with full bags of groceries and shit like that. And I felt like at 19, I was a full-grown man. You know, I've been training and fighting against men for 2 years at Worcester. I've been doing horrendous military-based training. I've been working mornings, noon, night, you know, to get by. My staple diet was like poached eggs on toast because that was the cheapest thing. And you know, like those kilo bags of pasta?
Yep. Yeah, I know them well, I was from university days.
Oh, yeah. And I remember when we lived in university halls, we only lived there because it was summer holidays, but we went around kind of busting locks off fridges and cupboards, taking like people's food. But like, you do what you got to do. But I just felt like I came to this group where I was 19 at the time when I arrived at Northampton, and I'd already been 2 years by myself, and everyone else was just starting out on their journey. So I looked at the people in the changing room, and it wasn't fucking easy. Like they used to call me big time and stuff like that, but I distanced myself from those guys. I still made good friends and had a couple of guys that I got on well with, but I was like, I'm not here to fuck around. I don't want to just be an academy player. I've done that for a couple of years. I want to go train with the men. I want to hang out with the men. So really early, I latched on to a couple of my idols growing up. You know, like there's a Carlos Spencer signed the same year as me. So like 3 years previous, I'm in New Zealand watching the All Blacks as a 16-year-old, and King Carlos is there. And then at 19, my first pre-season, I'm in a room and he's cooking me an omelette. I'm like, I'm rooming with the king.
Surreal, yeah.
So
surreal, I can imagine.
I'm like, right, I'm going to latch on to the king. And there's Bruce Rehana, another Kiwi guy who signed my rugby ball when I was 10 years old. Paul Tupai, who I watched for the Bay of Plenty, which is like my provincial side in New Zealand. I watched him for a decade. And it turns out like his dad used to drive the bus that my dad used to catch to work. And, you know, Big Toops now is like my best friend. He's stayed in Northampton. His son Connor, who I've known since 6 years old, is now 21 in the Saints first team. So I kind of latched on to these older dudes, and I was like, I want to be seen as a man, and I want to learn. You know, they spoke my language. They were Kiwis. Culturally, we were very similar. And you know, I got invited to the back of the bus. It was the old days where, like, the back of the bus doesn't exist anymore. It's like anyone can sit wherever they want. But kind of got, you know, worked my way down the back of the bus and pull up at the services, and, you know, 50 quid would be put in my hand, or the credit card would be like, Neff, go get the beers, go get the McDonald's, get whatever you want for yourself. And these are the days where I didn't have a car as well. So when we got back off the bus, I wouldn't drink, and I'll drive the boys around the pubs, I'll drive them around town, and then I'll drop them home. And then I get to keep the car for the weekend. So like, I got looked after in that respect. And then I suppose I created my own sort of environment or family, because Christmases I didn't have my family, or so every sort of milestone or those events was spent with those people. And then when I look back at it now, the penny's just dropping. But I suppose it's the law of averages and who you spend your time with, right? I just wanted to be seen as a you know, like a men's rugby player, not as an academy boy, and I think it worked. You know, I kind of distanced myself, and yeah, I don't know, I've kind of digressed massively there, but
no, it's just a continuation of the beginning, really. But it's the thing that jumped out at me was just how much of a steep learning curve it was, and I think how your age could have easily been perceived as a restriction for you, when in reality your experience was years ahead of those around you and had forced you to learn lessons that people in their mid-30s might not yet have learnt. And I think that leads quite nicely into the sort of key question I've got, which is that you then, that learning curve became even steeper because you very quickly became captain of your club. And in my mind, you are an architect of culture rather than the typical expectation of what a captain is, which is loud, shouting from the front and doing all these things that you'd expect a typical sports captain to be, whereas you were very much in amongst the DNA of the team, the DNA of the club, working almost from the back office to the front rather than the other way around. So I think it'd just be great to hear a bit more about what you felt you brought to the table when you became captain, and then how that developed over time.
It's an interesting way to put it, an architect of culture. It's a very nice way to put it. But I think what was born from it is, again, not the loneliness, but not having. I didn't understand people going home for their birthdays to see their parents, because I didn't have that. You know, I just lived and breathed the club. Like, the club became my family. Everyone, like every member of staff, from the reception to the officers to the cleaners, I just knew everyone, and after every game I had nowhere to go, so I'd be in the bar to the very end with some of the old boys. So like, the early days were fun in that respect, but I think it was unique in the fact that it takes time to develop that. I don't think you can go in anywhere and create a good culture overnight. You can because it's very hard to do that, because you've got to disrupt to start with. You've got to change habits, to create a good culture. So I think I kind of grew with it, and because the club meant so much to me and I became almost part of the fabric, like I used to get my the Jamaican ladies over the road at the laundromat. I used to go hang out with them and just do my laundry there with them. Then they'd start bringing me like jerk chicken. So like Northampton very much became a community and a family, and everyone talks about a rugby club being that. But again, I think there's a lot of lip service paid to that. Whereas I fully felt, I was part of the community. On match day, I used to like bike to the games sometimes, or after training, I remember one of the academy boys pulling out of the club in his little, what are they, top of Mercedes, like the ones you get on, makes you look like you got a flash car, but you can get them on lease for about 200 quid a month or something.
Yeah, another ones. There's plenty of them in most city centres around the UK.
Yeah, but he's pulling out the club. He's like, "You want to ride?" And I was sat at the bus station. I was like, "No, I'm good." And he's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Getting the bus." And I called up with him the next day. He's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I was going to town." And he's like, "Why? Like, why were you catching the bus?" And I was like, "Well, it's easy and it's cheap." He's like, kind of like not turning his nose up at catching the bus, but he thought it was crazy. But like, I don't know. There's just little things like I used to walk home when I lived in town. I used to catch the bus. I just knew people in the community. Like, and Northampton is very much a rugby club within the community. It's only a town. It's not a city. There is a football team, but the rugby team's more supported. So it was, I got it. And when you play there 15 years, you get to know supporters by first name basis and stuff like that, which is sometimes a little bit too comfortable.
Blessing and a curse, I can imagine.
Yeah, the weekly shop to Old Sainsbury's became good if you won, or difficult if you lost, and equally going for a pint afterwards. I basically came up with a rule: is you shouldn't show your face in town if we've lost the game, because it actually meant that much to people, and it only pissed people off if they saw you out, larging it up in town if you hadn't delivered on the field. Whereas, in the good years where we're winning a lot, it was just good fun as well. So, I think it just takes time with culture to create that stuff, and it was born out of relationships, I suppose, and time. I knew the club, I knew how it ticked, and I think when you can kind of pass on the meaning of that community to your players, that this isn't just a paycheck. Like, you're actually inspiring people. People care if we win or lose. They joke about the Churches factory, the shoe factory, or the Carlsberg factory in town. Like, production goes down if we lose. So, do you know what? It meant a lot to me. I love the place because I created my own sort of life here. And mate, I only live like 5 miles up the road now. But yeah, I think it just became a sense of family for me, and that's why I cared so much about it. And I suppose, the captaincy role, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing at the start. And even at the end, you still question yourself, like, what am I doing? Is that right? Is that wrong? But I think when I was that kind of ingrained in loving the place, I think that may have rubbed off on others.
It makes sense. It makes perfect sense, because I've always been most inspired and most attentive to those that I feel are genuine and authentic in the way that they actually lead people. I think the word captain, the word lead have slightly different meanings to me. I don't know exactly why, but I feel like leadership goes beyond the pitch itself, and I feel like you led the club rather than just the team, which I think is quite rare. I can't think of many sports captains over the years that I can say that as confidently as I could with you, based on the way that things have manifested. But I think the evolution of that is, obviously you then became captain of England under Eddie Jones, and first question is, what was it like working with Eddie Jones, and how did he help you grow as a captain from, as you said, even towards the end of the career, not necessarily knowing what you were doing, but I'm sure along the way you thought, I'm doing a good job at points. How did Eddie help you become the best version of yourself?
Man, he made me basically realise what work ethic is, and not leaving a stone unturned in search of and preparation and diligence and whatnot. And I think the comparison here is, it was this really difficult one, because when you're at Northampton and you've been there for so many years, a new player signs and they're like, oh, Dylan's been here for 8 years, 10 years, shit, 15 years by the end of it. Like, he knows this place, listen to him, or, you know, be guided by him. But then you go to England and you adopt this team and you're the captain and you're front and centre of rivals. You know, we played Leicester as our local derby, both clubs 140 years old almost. You know, my direct competition, Tom Young's, his best mate Dan Cole. Like, professionally probably both hate me, but if we all walk away from it and we go for a pint, it's all good. But then, like, one week we're playing Leicester, and then the following week we go into England camp, and it's like I've then got to try and bring these people together. So that was difficult. But I think what made it easy is Eddie created an aspirational group. He basically said, if you don't want to pull your weight and if you don't want to buy in, you're not going to be here. He basically said you can F off. So my job was easy in that respect. So if I asked someone for help, or if I asked someone to do something, or if I needed something from someone and I wasn't getting it, ultimately this never happened, but I could say, like, this guy's not pulling his weight, like, and he would be gone. And Eddie used players in that respect to create corridor chat. You know, I tell a story about one player, you know, played up in, it was either in Newcastle or Sale, drove down after he played Sunday night, one-on-one with Eddie. Everyone has a one-on-one with Eddie when they turn up. And he full well knew that he wasn't going to use this player to play. He was in the wider squad. And naturally, how are you, mate? You know, come in, how are you, mate? And the player says, you know, just played, just driven 3, 4, 5 hours. I'm tired. And he just said, fuck off. Get out. Go. And he literally went, and he turned up, and he was gone within half an hour because he said he was tired. And he told me why he did it, because, you know, if he's tired, he goes back to his roommate, tells his roommate he's tired, and then, you know, lads hang out in rooms, 4 or 5 of them are in there, and then they think, oh, tomorrow he's going to take it easy, so I'm going to go into physio and report, you know, a neural issue with my back, and then all of a sudden you got 5, 6, the attitude of the camp kind of goes that way. You know, it's almost like a cancer. It can grow pretty quick. Whereas he nipped it in the bud sharpish, and instead everyone would talk about being tired, everyone was talking about, did you hear about that guy saying he was tired? So everyone's like, I'm not tired, we're good, like, we're good to go. So that was a pretty good example of the power of words, and I learned that from him. But your question was like, how was it working with him? It was intense. Was it enjoyable? No. Was it satisfying? Yes. I look back on it with great fondness, because I learned a lot about myself. I got pushed probably more mentally and physically, more mentally than physically. But he basically said, you're one of the oldest players in the team. Your skill set is limited, which, you know, I understand. As a player, I was very good at certain things, but only those things. He just said, as long as you do this, this, and this, and you be the example of work ethic as one of the oldest players here, there's a place for you. So he basically gave me plenty of opportunity to display work ethic. It's almost like ancient Rome, you know, like on days off, kind of the guys were sat around getting massage, you know, eating grapes, drinking coffees, playing PlayStation, and I would be doing extra fitness. You know, he got in UFC coaches to roll with me, ground and pound, and he made it visible. You know, after training, it would be, right, everyone get to recovery, get down to spa, sauna, and quite publicly it would be, Dylan, top up over here. You know, as the guys are walking off, I'm walking off to the cones, you'll sit out for me. So it wasn't because I was unfit. Physically, I always needed to improve. I get that, because my weight sort of fluctuated, undulated, was pretty turbulent, went up and down. But I look back at my time under Eddie from year 1 in 2016 to when I finished, man, I looked physically so much better by the end of it. So he said, we can, my first meeting, he said, you're going to be the example of work ethic. And he said, physically in your game, we can't change much, but we can just notch it up and get a couple of 1%ers in you. And I look at physically even how I looked when I retired compared to when I started. I was way different, which was great. It was kind of proof of not the pudding, but I cut the puddings out. But it was just intense, mate. You know, he was he's one of those guys that can function on 4 or 5 hours a night I need 9 hours, 8.5, 9 hours. And when you've got someone like him who functions like that, he fills all his spare time with rugby, with data, with questions, he wants to know things. So he's very respectful. I mean, he plays games with some guys, at 4 a.m, guys get text messages, and that's not him. He's just up, he's thinking about rugby. But every day my day would start with meeting with him, and every day would finish with meeting with him. And that would almost dictate not my mental health, but my state of mind. I'd either go to bed happy or wake up happy, or have a good day if it was a good meeting, depending on what mood, or if he wanted to fire a few fucks into the team and he thinks we were just a bit complacent, he would come through me, the night before. He would say, today was terrible, what are we doing here? We shouldn't even bother, it's too relaxed, the guys don't care, we're going to get beaten at the weekend. This is a very polite way of saying it, by the way. So I'd then go to bed. I wouldn't go to bed without addressing it, so I've got to get, George Cruz, Maro Toje, Billy Vunipola, Owen Farrell, George Ford, Ben Youngs, Danny Kerr. I've got to get these guys in the room and be like, today wasn't good enough. Tomorrow I need you to pick up 3-4 people each, and so that the density of the squad know the message. And again, the next morning could walk in with the same message, or he might be in a good mood. He might have just had his coffee and he's like, good mate, make sure we have a good day today. So full well knowing that I've probably taken care of the issue or the complacency. And sometimes, the team wasn't even complacent. It's just, you learn to know what coaches are doing. So you know how to address it. So I think in a leadership role with Eddie in particular, leadership and high performance was always in the front of my mind. So, if you walk into a room and I ask you to find something green, you'll find everything that's green in that room. And one of his mentors or confidants within that setup, I worked with a bit with Craigie, a guy called Neil Craig, who's an AFL guy. He taught me this, and he said, if you're constantly thinking about high performance and good standards, wherever you go, you'll be looking for good standards and high performance. And equally, when you don't see it, you'll see shit standards and sloppy performance. So the whole time as a captain, when you've got someone like Eddie and Craigie at the top, it made me think like that. So wherever I went, from cleanliness to kind of technique and walkthroughs, body height at breakdown, would have to be at match height, even though we were walking. Ball presentation would have to be exactly how Danny Kerr and Ben Youngs would want the ball in a game. Don't just roll it back. Don't just roll onto your back and just, everything had to be 101 or 110%, in terms of your mental application. Equally, walking around seeing water bottles or tape just chucked on the floor, it was all small signs of either high performance or not good enough, So I think working with Eddie, it was just always front of mind, thinking about rugby, thinking about the team, and if anything, not thinking about myself. The guys came off the field, tell me to shut up if you want, but the guys would go off the field, go for food, because food's part of recovery. So the guys would just smash out a couple thousand calories in a session on the field, go eat food, get to the spa, ice, sauna, water, all stretching, all compulsory. They're all compulsory things to do, but we had to make sure that we policed ourselves so guys were recovering well. Whereas I'd walk off the field and go straight to a media session, so I wouldn't even eat. I might take a protein shake with me. You see so many captains sat, after a game with a protein shake just to get something in them. While the rest of the boys are probably having a couple of beers, eating pizza in the change room, you know what I mean? And then I'll do media, then straight from media, there would be a board or management style sort of meeting. And you got to remember there's 3 members of staff to each player. So you'd be in this sort of boardroom setting with every head of department around the table, from S&C to logistics to team managers to physios to and everyone reports back in. The team manager wants to know, what time do you want to go out for dinner, where do you want to go for dinner, by the way, what hotel out of these 3 in Edinburgh do you want to stay at, this one's got a swimming pool, and coffee morning on the morning of the game, which coffee shop do you want to go to. And then S&C is saying, tomorrow's weight session, we're going to do this before. And then massage comes in, they're like, right, the massage stops for tomorrow. Then the supplement guy comes in and goes, the lads aren't taking their fish oils in the morning and the piss pots. These players are missing out. So you get constantly getting all this information trying to process. I had this little red book that I just wrote everything down and like a checklist. So leave that meeting. I've also got to eat, recover myself because training's tomorrow and it's going to be fucking hard. So I've got to get in the ice. Then I've got to go around all these departments. I've got to chase people and wipe their asses and tell them to do their piss tests. Because if none of that happens, we get complacent and standards drop, and ultimately off the field, if it goes down the shitter, on the field, follows.
Is the aim, do you think, for you? Well, it was your role to try and make as many players take total responsibility of that themselves as possible, or do you feel like it was always your role to micromanage each and every one of them?
No, I was very fortunate to have good people around me. So, and I've just talked about a whole lot of things outside of rugby, but equally, when you think about rugby, you've got breakdown to defence to attack to line out to scrum, and it was so good when you could say, Owen Farrell, can you take care of all the defence stuff? So that's that done. He's a good person, really diligent, take care of it. George Ford, all the attack. Ben Youngs, Danny Kerr, all that. Line out stuff. Maro, George Cruz, take care of that. So that was like weight off my shoulders. They got it. They really got it. And they call it leadership density. Like if you can get, like if I'm just by myself trying to do everything, and I don't empower someone else to do their thing, and then they don't empower 2 or 3 people to come with them, the scales are way out of balance. Whereas if you can get the bulk of the group all doing good things, having responsibility, creating good habits, driving performance, you end up with the scales fully tipped towards where you want it to be, or that percentile with you. And then if you've got 2 players, 5% of the squad not doing it, they stick out like a sore thumb. And in an aspirational environment, you don't even have to bring those guys over, because it's clear and obvious that if they're not over there, like the coach just goes, you're gone. So you make it that obvious through your density of doing good things, that where players should be. So like equally, if you come into that environment, you should be able to see, smell, feel what's right and wrong in our environment, And if you did something wrong, I'd expect one of my team to be like, hey man, like, what are you doing? Like, it's quite clear that we don't chuck our rubbish on the floor here, or our strapping, or we sweep the change rooms, which the All Blacks are famous for doing, because someone put it in a book called Legacy, But every rugby team I know sweeps changing rooms, or turns the shirts inside out type thing, or the right way around. But I think micromanaging it was managing, just trusting people to do the right thing. And I think the best thing I learned from that is, you don't have the ideas. I never thought I had all the ideas, because I certainly didn't. So, people fucking can surprise you. It's like, can you do this? And they go and do a great job. And like, their attack knowledge is way better than yours. So it's like, man, you smash that. You take care of that. You keep doing that, please. Thank you. Just let them know they're doing a good job. So we created, basically, you hear it all the time, there's not just one captain. I was basically the guy that just oversaw it all, reported to Eddie, but basically I had everyone doing, roles within the team, which made my job easier in some respects.
I think this is why experiences like yours are so translatable to a business environment, because you were almost the chief exec and you had these department leads, these board members that were then trickling down the culture, the aims, the ambitions, the KPIs, all these things that you had to hit on from your little red book to everybody within the team. And it's creating a culture where the second you try and hide, everybody will point at you as the guy that's hiding, I think, isn't it? But not in a critical way, but in a just maintaining those standards across the board, because standards are not something that you can jump in and out of. They're something that needs to be maintained across the board, to be maintained in each of the things that you're working on specifically. So standards off the pitch are as important as they are on the pitch. And something I'm fascinated to know, I don't know whether you'll know because of how involved you are with the England camp now, but are there any standards or cultural habits that you feel that you implemented as a captain that have now stayed a part of the England camp and will stand the test of time?
I don't know, because I haven't been back in. But there's one thing. Yeah, there's just one thing that was quite important to me is was eating. funnily enough. I love food, but no, I just find like phones are a big thing, and quite simply, I just said like if we're eating together, especially with the culture with data and social media and stuff like that now, is people are always on the phone. So when we eat, I don't know if they still do this. It was really hard at first, but if anyone pulled a phone out of the table, it was a straight 10 press-ups, and it was like a bad habit that soon got rid of. And what happened is, people started talking over the table, and instead of socially it's good, you get to know more about people because you're spending time, you're almost breaking bread over the table. But equally, like, instead of having a meeting about a meeting, stuff started being solved over the dinner table or lunch or breakfast. So, going into breakfast, instead of having breakfast and having a meeting about what we want to get out of the morning session, it'd be like, right, defensive group or breakdown group just meet, we'll have breakfast together. So the boys sit there with bacon and eggs, porridge, bit of fruit, and it's like, right, you're going to cover this today. What are the 3 kind of key things? And so I found that banning phones from the table was just something which paid dividends massively elsewhere, and the connections grew. And this is all coupled with Eddie's sort of main mantra of like, playing for England's an absolute privilege, and if you don't want to buy in, you can bugger off. Someone else will come here and do it, because you've got people climbing over each other to play international rugby. So, relationships formed were a lot stronger, and I think that was just one small thing that sticks out in my mind. And I felt like the hardest thing to do is to police people. You don't want to have to police people. You don't want to be the only guy, become unpopular because you're forcing everyone to do press-ups, but then it soon catches on and other people start policing, and then it gets to a point where no one needs policing because no one's doing it. So like, you've got to go through a bit of hurt and pain at the start, I suppose, of being unpopular and being a bit of a Hitler in that respect of, but then you get people like Eddie on board. Like, he loved it. And he got it as well. So that was one small thing. I just think
it'd be interesting to know if it's still there, wouldn't it? I mean, I'm sure from a personal perspective you'd like to know, but maybe it'd be a shame if it wasn't. But I think it's a fantastic habit for everybody. I mean, I'm guilty of not giving meal times the respect they deserve from a just basic social interaction point of view, because most of my life is run through my phone, which is something that I love because it allows me to be quite fluid, but I also hate because I'm staring at this little device all day. Yeah, so I think
it's not good, is it? It's
no,
not good. It's not healthy.
It's not. But it opens up conversations that are fantastic. So there's pros and cons. But I think on the nature of the devices that we all have in our pockets, it's fair to say that you've been in some situations where you've been on the receiving end of public criticism. I think it's fair to say. We won't dwell on them, but a few YouTube searches will confirm the situations that I'm referring to. But I think what I'm fascinated in, I don't care about the situations. I know why we see red. We all see red. It's when it manifests that's the real challenge, and how we move forwards from that's where it gets fascinating. But you have always come back stronger, it seems, and I'm fascinated to hear your approach to bouncing back from some of the more high pressure incidents that you've experienced in your career.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, it's not chicken and egg, is it? It's just chicken. I created all those problems, but I had 8 major disciplinaries in my career. And since retiring and doing more of this sort of thing, and obviously publishing a book and then having to speak about that, I can't justify those things, but I can contextualize them. I can put a little bit of context around each incident. And when you write down, like, it's a bit embarrassing to say, but like biting, eye gouging, punching, elbowing, verbal abuse. What else did I do? I don't know, those things. They all. I shouldn't be allowed outside of my front door, you know what I mean? But when I space those over 15, 16 years and then put a bit of context to them, some of them I'm guilty of, some of them I think the system, the legalities of rugby or the law, I felt like I've got the book thrown at me.
The black and white nature of some of them.
Yeah, so like, I didn't headbutt someone. my head did touch someone, but it wasn't a headbutt, those sorts of things. But then I look at what was going on in my life outside of the game at the time. There's often chaos. There's often something, and I use the word chaos very lightly. It's not like the house was burning down and I was going through a divorce or anything like that. But there's always something outside of the game that was distracting me or pulling me away from focusing on that moment. And so there wasn't harmony potentially in my professional life or my personal life or whatever it may be, And I don't want to justify any of the stuff I did, but when you're a professional rugby player, and I've worked this out, and you want to sustain that career, you become very selfish. And I gave up asking for time off to see family or to go to a funeral or to go to a wedding and be a groomsman, and it just, you kind of got hit in the face because culturally the game was very different when I came through. I stopped asking because I knew the answer was no. And when you're the club captain, you are the example. You never have a day off. You can't have time off. So there's always something going on in my life, which led to those things happening. And I suppose the other thing, especially in my early years, where I was far looser on the field, I lacked or resented authority because I'd left home at 16, lived by myself since I was 17, and I came through the old school of rugby culture, I think. And when rugby back in the early 2000s, it was still pretty amateur. There was punching, there was fish hooking and ball grabbing, and it was all that shit went on. And I kind of came through that school of you've got to not get them before they get you, but you can't take a backward step, but you've got to be confrontational. And again, cutting my teeth at Worcester at a championship club. So I cut my teeth with a whole lot of kind of journeymen, basically old hard bastards that probably weren't good enough to play Premiership rugby. So they were just hard old boys. And at 17, 18, I was rolling with those guys, trying to basically earn my corn, So my rugby experience from an early age probably formed how I probably played the game, how I was confrontational, how I maybe went and got into trouble. I remember my first session at Worcester. They said, go get in that morning session against the men's team. I was 17 and basically broke into a fight, and I got my first kind of couple punches in the face. I mean, my big brother had punched me in the face, and I had a fight at school before that, but being punched by a man at 17 in the face is just right, this is how you do it. You either let that happen or you don't. So that was formative in that respect. So I'm just trying to put a bit of context to why I played the game like I did, or trying to understand why I did. And again, I wasn't athletically gifted, or I wasn't overly skillful. I wasn't a game breaker. So this is great for people that are listening that are similar. There's a place in rugby for you. If you've got good confrontational, physical edge, and you're competitive, you can play rugby professionally. You know what I mean? As long as you want it and you graft, there's a spot for you in a team, because you've played footy yourself. Backs are very talented, but I'd say most of the forwards that I played with, they were probably picked or selected largely on character traits. Man, who's this guy? Melbourne Storm. Do you watch rugby league?
Occasionally. I won't know the name.
He's he's that famous. I can't remember his name, but he came and spoke to the England rugby team, and I had dinner with him afterwards, and he said something that was really cool, which has stuck with me. And Melbourne Storm are championship winners. They win everything. Man, I wish I could remember his name. Sorry.
I'll put it in the show notes if we do.
But
or you'll shout it out in 5 minutes' time with no context.
Exactly. He largely picks his team on defensive qualities. So he picks his players on the best defenders. And I was like, why? He said, I sprinkle in a talented attacker, someone who tips the balance that way. But the bulk of my team I pick on their defence. And he explained it to say, to defend, it takes a mindset, it takes an attitude, it takes a character trait to be a good defender. Because we've all played with people who are good, but they don't really like tackling. And
put somebody on a sevens pitch. Put someone on a sevens pitch, and you'll quickly find out what side of the coin they sit on.
100%. So he basically won well, it's not his philosophy, but it's one of his selection philosophies, is he picks defensive players because they've typically got a better mindset, a better attitude to graft, a better attitude to contact and collision, and they love it, you know. So you're picking a team on a character trait, and I thought that was really interesting. So I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore, Fergus.
It's all valid. It's all valid. It's all pointing to the same things. But the question, sort of the one bit that hasn't maybe been addressed was how did you process? I think I know the answer. I think you were almost comfortable with you were comfortable with the decisions that you made in your career, where the media, the commentary online around the incidents maybe didn't get to you as much as it would others that weren't comfortable with their decisions as much as you were.
Yeah, so like the whole comeback piece, I suppose I was around. I was on Twitter and social media before Be Kind was a thing. I got my
Twitter's still not a kind place. It's the reason I stay off it. It's not a kind place.
But I remember just culturally, I remember getting a ban, and I was retweeting all the stuff that was said to me. So just kind of showing people what was coming through. And this was again before Be Kind was a thing. And the legal team from England Rugby kind of got in touch and said, take them all down. And I said, well, why? And they said, it's just not good, take them down. So I was like, I'm just showing what's been said to me. So I was basically told to remove all those things. But yeah, I got my fair bit of shit over the years. Some stuff, it was almost like the more you read it, it was water off a duck's back for me. There's one thing that really affected me in my most recent years, something about my daughter, which wasn't, I screenshotted it, and this kid he was a 17, 18-year-old kid at school, and I was just like, he needs to understand what he's doing. I was actually fuming about what he said, and I thought about ringing the principal, and then I just went, whoa, calm down. Like, it's just, if you read it and you give it the time, you basically let it grow. Whereas if you read it, or if you don't read it, that's the best way. You can just let it go. It doesn't affect you. But it just really annoys me when, especially, playing Six Nations, you get people that would abuse you, and then you, for whatever reason, you end up on their profile, and it's like they've got 2 kids, and then like they support this charity, and then it's like, I've just done something for that charity. And I think that's why sport's so great, because it drives so much emotion. But I think people got to understand the people playing it are also human in many respects, and I played a role. When I played across the white line, I turned into competition me. And I think that's the hardest thing. And even now, maybe I've crossed that bridge, but everywhere I went after or when playing, and I did speaking or I did a community engagement, people would come up and say things like, "I thought you were see you next Tuesday." And I'm like, for someone to even say that is like pretty weird. But you've changed my mind about you, or you're, I don't know. It's just really short-sighted.
It's the conviction. The conviction people say these things with when it comes to sportsmen or sportswomen. I think it's easy to forget that they're not robots performing a dance for you. There's people behind that. And actually, if you're supporting England and you're telling the captain of England that you feel this way about him, all you're doing is undermining the team that you support in the first place. Yeah. It's just, the hypocrisy is unbearable, really. I think it's there's steps being taken in modern sport to sort of snub it out, but as you've said, the power lies with the recipient, not with the sender. If you end up going down the hole of phoning the principal and giving it the time it deserves, it's achieved what they wanted it to. Whereas if you ignore it, it's gone nowhere.
So yeah, after reading a couple of years of that stuff, it was water off a duck's back. But I think what it taught me, and everyone says don't judge a book by its cover, but and you hear about, you're going to meet this person, and someone says, he's this or she's that, or I've heard. It's actually taught me to just step back and go, give everyone a fair go. You can only make your own mind up about how you're treated by someone, or and often, like, I watch any sort of sport now, and people are portrayed, or there's a certain narrative around the media, and certainly when I've done commentary and someone gets yellow carded or red carded, I look at it from that person's point of view. I'm like, why has this happened? How's that happened? Is everything all right at home? Like, what's going on in their life right now? And I don't know. I think it's too easy for all of us to get caught up in what's happening right then and there, instead of trying to dissect it and understand why someone's done something. And so I look at things differently now, and I like to think I approach people. I give everyone a fair shot. I'm not quick to judge.
Is king, and I think, as you've said, you don't know the full context behind the decisions that people make on the pitch, off the pitch, and that's what needs to be remembered by us all when it comes to sport and life in general. You can't judge people without knowing, without being in their shoes, as it was. But something I'm keen to touch on as well, just because you've come through an interesting evolution of rugby as a whole, is alcohol culture in it. Where do you think its place is now in rugby, and what do you think still needs to change, or does anything need to change?
No, I think I read a study the other day that's saying that I don't know what, are we millennials? You're a millennial. You Gen Z? What are you?
I'm millennial. Yeah, I think we're both millennials.
I think I just fall in by a year or two, but I think the next is that the Gen Zs just aren't drinking as much. I think if you just look at the information generation, it's all just a bit different now. There's more education around health and well-being and like mental health and things like that. So I think there's decision making or choices to be made now, whereas I think, I don't know, just when I came through, it was just what you did. It was just what we knew. It was what my parents knew. But in terms of rugby, like I certainly feel from grassroots to professional club rugby to international rugby is all different. It's changed in my career. When I came through my first years playing with Northampton, it was 2 nights a week, midweek, at the weekend as well. And for some reason, when you're young, like my body could do it. Like I had 2 pints yesterday, and I woke up hungover today. It's my first 2 pints since Christmas. I was really, really proud of myself. It tasted good as well. But I just think, yeah, and then playing for England at an early age, I didn't have. I think I was young, free and single at the time, but like playing with all your cronies at the same age, you're 21, 22, 23. It was a good time. We're on a good sort of rise. Performance wasn't front of house. High performance and winning rugby games was, but it was more about touring and travelling and experiencing, getting out of the hotel. And I mean, I went to Rugby World Cup and I brought a car. So in our downtime, we could go have fun. Like, if you'd asked 30-year-old, 33-year-old me that if I'd gone to Japan, go buy a car, I wouldn't have left the hotel. I would have been that bloody busy thinking about the team. But I think alcohol went with that. Every bit of downtime, everywhere we went, we wanted a night out or after every game. And club rugby is very, very comfortable in that sense. You've got guys that play every week. You've got guys that don't play every week. So, to keep them sane, they're not building towards Saturday like someone is. So guys do midweek is there. But then you go to international rugby now, like there's just no opportunity. The game is that hard and recovery is that important because it comes around, Monday comes around, Sunday, if you've got a short turnaround, you've got Friday game the following week, Sunday's a training day. So what tends to happen with the alcohol culture is it's almost like bottled up, and at the end of a campaign is like you have a bit of a blowout. And I remember even on those as a captain, I'd have my wife with me and I'd be there thinking I'd sit in the corner, have a couple of Peronis, and just watch because I didn't want anything to go wrong. I didn't want any trouble. I didn't want anyone to get, or if anyone was too pissed, I'd need to kind of get an arm around them, get security to get them home, So like even my sort of attitude towards it, I was still thinking about not fucking up, because if something had happened on the piss on my watch, it would have fallen on my shoulders, So
that's sort of the essence of the question for me, is that with the games being so marginal in professional and international rugby these days, and with all the notions on performance and all those little 0.5%, 1%ers, it's just interesting to me. I think the alcohol culture in rugby has a fantastic place in terms of community building. It's got its negatives, I'm sure some people will argue, but I think at the top level that you played at, I was just fascinated to hear where its place was when all these tiny little wins are being accrued over time to equal that performance on the day when it matters.
But I'll tell you what's important is the significance of a beer, or sharing a drink with someone over, and it doesn't have to be alcohol, but it's almost like sitting down and eating together. I think the kind of classic cheers with a mate after a game is quite significant, because you need to acknowledge that moment of working all week, putting your body through hell all week, and then putting your body through hell for a game. For what? Win, lose, you kind of need to acknowledge that moment. So I think the significance of clinking glasses, or even if it's waters, protein shake, whatever it is, just that significance of that moment is huge. But I'll tell you one thing about Eddie. We went from Martin Johnson to boozy, amateur, kind of good fun culture, to Stuart Lancaster, which was clinical, like no alcohol. There was actual rule, like there's no drinking. It was controlled. And then Eddie came in and said, well, there's non-negotiables on the rugby field. I'm the coach. I'm going to work with you guys, and I want it to be this way. But off the field, it's your team. You do what you want. If you want to drink, you drink. If you don't want to drink, you don't drink. If you want to go do that, you do that. You can do what you want. It's your team. So basically, that fell with me, and he basically said, "Oh, we're going to have a social tonight," or in our down weeks in Kensington, where in between the Six Nations, there's a couple of fellow weeks. We would break up into 4s and 5s and go to pubs. He would force drinking sessions. Not drinking sessions, but I think it's almost like if you tell someone they can't have something, they want it. And like, I'm a fat kid, so if you tell me I can't have cake, like I've seen this in camp with many a player. Davey Wilson, big boy from Newcastle. Like the Moose. There's no pudding, no cake, nothing sweet at training. And guess what? These guys live at home, 10 months of the year where they have biscuits and they can have a pudding. But then you go into this environment where for 2 months you're not allowed it. So, yeah, they go and they eat their broccoli, their chicken, and then they drive down the road to M&S or Waitrose or Co-op, and they buy like 20 quid's worth of shit and go sit in their room and eat it. Whereas Eddie did the same thing. He put boxes of celebrations on tables. We had pudding most nights. And for me, for someone who I love eating, I love cakes, I love sugar, like I would then make a good decision at the table. Instead of eating a whole pack of biscuits in my room, I'd have a tiny slice of dessert, or so you'd kind of scratch the itch but make a good decision around it. And it's the same thing with alcohol. Like if you say guys can't go out, they can't do this, they can't do that, that's where you get like a player going, oh, I'm going to go out, I really want to go out, and then they sneak out the fire exit and they take 2-3 players with them, and then you hear a newspaper story about like 3 players out in the piss on tour. So you're constantly providing opportunity for guys to have a drink or to be social and be out and dine out to get out of the bubble. And the thing that turned out is that we'd turn up to any sort of social event and everyone would just have a Coke, a lemonade, and all the beers would be left on ice. Like no one would have one. James Askell would have one, and sometimes I'd say to the boys, like, we actually want the guys to have a few beers tonight, and Eddie's told me we've got the morning off tomorrow, like there's a day off tomorrow, there's no training, let's actually have a team bonding session. So I would say to, again, my kind of key influences in the team, boys, make sure you just hoe in tonight, like have a good time, like have 2 or 3, 4, 5, let everyone else know that it's okay, but when you give people the option, they make the right choice, and guys often just didn't choose it because they're so worried about body fat and training, and guys are professional in terms of understanding injuries and whatnot. It's a inflammatory sort of poison, isn't it? So yeah, it's changed completely, mate. I remember in the early days, just it's all a blur really, compared to when I finished.
I can imagine. But I mean, it just, as you've said, it shows the power of sharing things and the power of community amongst men, which sort of leads on to the question that sort of, well, the essence of how we sort of connected in the first place, which is the importance of Movember to us both, and what does it mean? What does it mean to you, and why is it important?
So probably the biggest, or I don't regret anything that happened in my career, but the one thing I stand by is I got red carded in the Premiership final in 2013, I think, and for verbal abuse. And again, the context around that is Northampton's first ever Premiership final, you know, and this is the family, the club, the town that I love, and I'm the captain. I take the team there, and then on the stroke half time, I get red carded for saying the words "fucking cheat," which a standby. I was talking to Tom Youngs and Dan Cole and Leicester and the derby, like the whole. You know, I felt like the scrum that we just got penalised in, we got jumped, they hit and went, you know, scrumming terminology. I got caught off guard, and you know, Wayne Barnes, the referee, thought I said that to him, and you know, like I didn't say that to him. So when you look at verbal abuse on my rap sheet, you know, it's one thing I truly believe I didn't do. But off the back of that, you can imagine the social media hate, the shame that I felt, especially in the community. I mentioned doing my shopping. I couldn't leave my house. You know, I was the captain of the local rugby team, just been to the Premiership final, fucked it up for the whole town. Like, people calling for my head. I don't think I got death threats, but it was basically go away, don't come back type thing. We don't want you. And this is a club that I felt so passionate about. And off the back of that, you know, I missed out on the British and Irish Lions. I'd the Sunday before, I'd been to the Mad Monday, the Super Sunday kind of, where you do all the admin. I was even in the squad photo. They photoshopped my head off it for the final photo and put Rory Bess on. It's quite funny. So I got all the kit. I've been fitted for my suit. I'd done all that. So there was a lot going on, you know, but I wasn't worried about that. All I wanted to do was get away from rugby. I wanted to get away from Northampton. And my wife just said, you know, get away. Like, she had a couple of commitments, so she couldn't go anywhere. And my best mate, Paul Tupai, who I talked about earlier, he said, a couple of the Bedford boys are going to LA and out to Vegas. And I was like, oh, okay. And I played with Lee Dixon, he's not quite from Edinburgh, but he's from up Newcastle, and his brother Carl Dixon, the referee. So there's like a tenuous link there. And this is the great thing about rugby. It was just like, I rung up Dicko, Carl Dixon, the referee, which is quite funny after being to LA and Las Vegas with him for 3 weeks, when he then refereed me for the next few years after that. Was hilarious. It's like, yes, sir, thank you, sir. And like, I know a few calls went my way because I know things about him. But I rung up Dicko and just said, hey, I obviously know Lee, as I heard you boys going out to LA and Vegas. You know, can I jump on it? And they said, yeah, man, like, come. So let us just check. We're staying with this guy, Adam, who's a mutual friend of someone else's. So do you know JC from Movember?
Yeah.
Yeah, so then there's Adam from Movember, who's one of the other founders. There's 4 founders. So they were sleeping on Adam's in Adam's spare room in LA. His job was to go and grow Movember in LA. And he started out in like the janitor's office by himself, not knowing anyone, from Australia. And then basically, when, you know, a couple of years I returned, they moved into this headquarters opposite Beats by Dre, like this big unit. Like, it grew massively. But basically, in one of my darkest times, I suppose, where I felt my most shame and embarrassment and fell out of love with rugby, I considered leaving the game. I didn't want to play the game because the narrative against me, by then I'd already had 3, 4, 5 disciplinaries. I wasn't wanted in the game, I felt. People continued to tell me that, and I kind of feared if I came back, only something else would happen and I'd be the first ever rugby player to be banned from the game completely, you know? Like, what was I capable of? Like, what would happen? So I hated rugby, but I jumped on this trip to LA in Vegas, and it worked well because 2 weeks into that trip, I was actually meeting a whole lot of friends for a stag do anyway. So I went out 2 weeks earlier, jumped on Dicko's trip with another guy called Sarch, and I slept on the couch of Adam, the founder of Movember. He just said, yeah, man, like, cool, crash on my couch. Him and his wife. And then from there, like, I just look back at it in such a dark time. Like I said, that time of shame and embarrassment and falling out of love with everything that I've been doing, literally on the flip of a coin. Like, if I hadn't said that and we'd gone and won that final, I wouldn't have met these people. But I ended up in LA and had such a great time. Kind of rebalanced me, kind kind of showed me that, you know, no one in America gives a fuck about rugby. No one knows who you are. It just gave me a little bit of perspective, and I owe a lot to Jess and Adam for letting me basically crash with them for 10 days in LA, and then off the back of that, we've become very good friends. You know, both. Well, I've got kids now; they've got kids, and when we could travel, you know, going back to New Zealand, most years would stop in LA and always spend time with them. So, do you know what? Movember, Adam, just that sort of. From there, what they gave me, I suppose, the following year, I came back to Northampton and I fell in love with rugby again. And I kind of had that word with myself. And Movember was there for me, but the founder of Movember was there for me when I needed something the most. And part of me coming back to rugby and fucking up the previous year's final as a captain, I said, I'm going to give my life, I'm going to give my soul, I'm going to give everything to this club this year to win this tournament, you know. And the greatest redemption sort of story in my life was like we won the title that year, and man, I gave everything to it. And I think one of the best things about uniting the club, and I'd recommend it to anyone that wants to bring people together, is find a cause which makes people selfless or sacrifice, you know, think about something other than themselves. Because I basically said for Movember, the whole squad, the whole management, everyone kind of dictated that we're going to grow a moustache. Everyone's going to do it. I don't care if you can't. I don't care if what your missus thinks. I don't care about vanity. We're growing a moustache. I'm going to raise money for Movember. All well knowing that they'd sort of helped me on my journey. And what it did is it became competitive. We raised, you know, £50,000 that year. The guys brought in. We became, you know, like Movember in rugby, I think we were like the first Premiership club that kind of really flew the flag for it. And then off the back of that, you know, we had our team, the Front Mo Union, which kind of raised all that money. And then from there, the years after, I stepped back. And then, like, there's a 13-year-old kid that did it. You know, loads of dads were doing it in the community. And I kind of saw, it's kind of fucking egotistical, but I never raised or created a group after that because I thought, when I saw what happened, I'd done my job. It was almost like the legacy or the continuation of that first year. Everyone in Northampton kind of took off and did their own thing, and then everyone started raising their own money and coming up with their own initiatives. And I was just so proud of that. And I mean, along with winning the title, I think Movember kind of brought our team closer together, made it competitive. The guys gave up their upper lip, raised a whole lot of money for something really good. And everyone felt good about it, you know. Everyone felt like they were bought in, and it just pulled us nice and tight. But yeah, Movember, like, I owe so much to that charity, you know. And these are the early years as well. I think they're only maybe 5-6 years old at that time. And if you look at what they're doing now, like,
yeah, it's incredible.
It's inspirational, isn't it? It's amazing with their outreach.
It sounds like the very essence of the intention of the charity was sort of lived through you, in the sense that you were a bloke having a hard time, you lent on another bloke who helped you out, and that unlocked the best version of yourself to get you to where you are now. And that's what the charity aims to do in its very essence. So it's sort of... I mean,
I used it in a very selfish way. I used it to bring my sports team very close together, but...
Bad intentions can lead to good outcomes sometimes, but...
But when you go to like local pub and you see people with a tash, it's pretty cool, and you know, like, everyone refers to each other as Mo Bros, and you just, it's a good reminder again not to judge books by, you know, everyone's got something going on, you know, in their lives. You know, people face different challenges all the time, and I just think these guys, I know there's plenty of other charities out there doing good things for blokes, but it feels like they were at the forefront of or popularising it, you know. And I like their attitude to doing things. It's almost like the rock stars of charity, that they've got a nice kind of tongue-in-cheek way of doing things. Cult status.
Only charity in the world with cult status, that's what drew me to them in the first place. And I think, as you said, it's a conversation starter. And that's why I keep mine. Well, I hide it with a beard at the moment, but it needs some Just for Men as well. It's looking a little bit paler than I'd like it, but it's.
How did you find yourself? What moment did you use the service?
No, so I was sitting in a coffee shop in Brixton. I remember it very well, and I was 18 months out of university. and opened my laptop to work. I was working for Heineken at the time. I was doing I'd just exited the graduate scheme. I was working a full-time role, and I got caught between policy changes, which meant I was being held up by protocol and just big corporate green machine bollocks that meant I couldn't do my job effectively, which meant I didn't feel fulfilled. And then I opened up my laptop, went to sit down, and I just got hit with this white noise where I thought, oh, fuck it, I just don't want to do this, but it made me like proper stressed and anxious. And then at that point I thought, right, you've been here before, the old version of you bottled this up, didn't do anything about it, kept plodding on, and you actually made yourself so miserable to the point where you attempted suicide. Let's not do that again. What are you missing? Sense of fulfillment. Let's find one. How can you do that? What are you good at? I was good at squatting at the time because I was powerlifting. And then I just sat there. I sat there that afternoon, and I just thought, right, charity. Let's do something for charity. What charities have I done in the past? And I thought doing something for cancer research, and then thought, no, I don't really have any connection to that. That won't give me fulfillment. And I kind of been on the fringes of Movember year on year just because of rugby up until that point. But then I just did a bit of digging and thought cult status, conversation starter, and it just adds a little bit of relatability to something that's actually quite difficult to talk about. I think that's what drew me in, and it was the fact that I could use the mustache as marketing for what I was going to do, and then committed to my first charity challenge with them after speaking to them on the phone, and then learnt more about the social work that they do, the services they offer, the things they've achieved, and I think it's a very unique way of having an impact as a charity because they allow for the community interaction goes well beyond the money raised, and I think it's the process and the journey of that month which allows for the actual intentions of the charity itself to really be effective. So yeah, I'm very proud to have been a part of it up until now, and will continue to disguise my, well, not good looks, but disguise my true looks with a curly whirly moustache in November every year, because it's something I say again, if someone points at you and says, why do you look like that, you dick, you can say, well, funny you ask, and then you can start a conversation around mental health, prostate cancer, or whatever else that you might not otherwise have had, and they might not otherwise have had, and that person might then go away and they might check their prostate years before they were meant to, and that might actually end up saving their life. It might end up saving a family. All these little things, and there's lots of things you've mentioned which make it a great metaphor for why it's important, because all these little things that you do stack up over time, and one conversation had as a result of somebody growing a moustache could save a person's life. 8, 10, 12 people separated from that. You never know, and you don't need to know. That's the beauty of it. It's just having fun, doing good is what I think they've said on a few campaigns in the past, isn't it? Yeah.
I find unless it affects you, it's hard to care about things. But then when it happens to, if we're talking about Movember, your brother, your father, your uncle, your grandfather, you know what I mean? Like the amount of people that kind of come and said to me, thanks for what you did. I didn't really do anything, but, I went and got this checked, or I got that checked. And, when Alex Corbacero, my friend, he got cancer. When it happens on your doorstep, that's where it's like, wow. And until that happens, I think a lot of people are kind of on their kind of course thinking about their things. And as soon as it kind of life smacks you in the face, you can show an interest in a certain charity. But I think Movember is so great because it just covers everything, man. Oh man, I'm thinking about my Mo this year now.
There we
I
go.
struggle with them, honest.
The process has
I'm adjusting
begun.
in with a running start as well.
Yeah, you can ease it in. But no, I just think it's achieved great things. It will continue to achieve great things, and it often starts conversations amongst men that are only had because they've broken the ice with the moustache. Because it's still, we spoke about the phrase that neither of us are particularly comfortable with off air beforehand, but the concept of toxic masculinity, which I feel has been bastardised by the media in some ways, but I think the traditional definition of masculinity is different to what it once was, is the way that I view it. But how you define that is more up to you than it is the media to tell you how you should act. That's
mate, how long we got? Like this is a whole other podcast, and I've probably got to form or be able to articulate my opinion, but I have some frustrations around that term myself as well. I told you a quick story about it being taught in schools, and I've got to stop. I might lose my job.
Well, we'll just settle on the fact that as men we can do better, and Movember is helping us do that.
Yes,
there we go. But I think
agree.
Just before, there's two sort of quick fire questions that I've got to ask. One comes from a place of ignorance, but also for those listening, it might not be. What elements of your captaincy career have you taken into your life as a parent?
Shit. Oh man, I haven't thought about that. That is a real, like, I do these things, you know. I do these talky things, these podcasts, these webinars, and no one's ever asked me that. You know, usually I've got something I can just roll off, but man, I don't know. Like, I'll tell you one thing is working with Eddie. Very growth mindset sort of guy at 60 years old. I've always been a growth mindset person, but I didn't know it. But then, obviously working with him, he started feeding me information, trying to improve me mentally, trying to, even the way I spoke or stood in front of a room, he kind of always fed back information and feedback. So always trying to help me grow. The books, the articles, the podcasts he used to send me. So I think the one thing that I try and do, and it's not about my kids, it's more about me. It's like I'm actively trying to be a good parent. I'm actively thinking about the right things to do, or how did that go down. And I think I don't know about other people, you know, depends what you're focused on at that time in your life. You know, if you're focused on work or yourself or love or relate, you know, whatever it may be, you focus on that. I actively think about parenting my kids. I actively think about disciplining them, inspiring them. I think about how I talk to them. I think about what I do with them. I try and be a really sort of front of house. Again, I'm thinking about parenting a lot. So if there's one sort of one thing, it's just actively thinking about trying to be a good dad. It doesn't mean I am a good dad. It just means I'm trying. Like I'm constantly thinking about it.
Well, that's something for sure, and I'm sure you're doing an excellent job, by the way. The self-deprecation is probably not required. But finally, just for a bit of relatability for us all, what are the non-negotiable habits that you've picked up throughout your career that you think apply best to our day-to-day lives?
Man, I get this wrong as well, right? Order and chaos, my friend.
Yeah, I'm getting it wrong at the moment as well. It's a tough balancing act, but it's a constant learning curve as well, which makes it exciting yet challenging.
But chaos is there. It's always there. It's waiting to smack you in the face, you know, whether it be being late for an appointment because the kid's shit himself and you need to stay home for an extra 10 minutes and change your nappy, so you turn up late. But, you know, you're always going to get chaos, things that you can't control. And I think as long as you've got order in the majority of your life, you know, again, that percentile, get up in the 80s, 90s, you're controlling, you know, your routine of what you're eating, what you're drinking, what you're training, what your work hours are you spending enough time with your kids? I kind of think about these things. Am I giving my wife enough time? And it's hard to kind of get it all right because something always falls on the back burner. You know, if work's really busy for me, I know physically I don't train as much, and then I start feeling shit mentally because I haven't worked out, and then because I haven't trained as much and I've been busy, my diet's probably not as good, and then my sleep, and then it's almost like self-fulfilling. So I try and create as much order as possible, and then when I fall off the bandwagon, I should go, shit, chaos is kicking in here, I kind of revert to order. And I don't, you saw those ice baths I was doing, I quite like that just for having order. I committed to doing something pretty shit every day, and then by the end of it, it wasn't shit, it wasn't that uncomfortable. I actually quite like the order and the routine of committing to doing something every day, because by doing that, it made me wanted to train, and then it made me want to eat well. So it was just the knock-on effect. So it's supposed to be a quick fire, but create as much order as you can and try and avoid the chaos. You can't avoid the chaos, but the more chaos you've got, you find more chaos, and then your whole life's fucking chaos, you know? So I just talk about, and I've got to remind myself all the time, is like, just try and get back to as much order as possible.
Yeah, order allows chaos to have less of an effect on you. I think it's the age old, isn't it? Control the controllables, and then things out with your control won't tank you like they might otherwise do. But I think
100%.
Yeah, no,
you're a wise man for 24,
25, yeah. But no, thank you. I'll take that to finish on. No, mate, really enjoyed that. Some gems, some insights that I'm sure we can all take away. But no, thank you again for the conversation, and look forward to hopefully catching up properly at some point soon.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for everything you're doing, mate. Like your story, your insane mountain climb, the insane triathlon that you're about to take on, and all the insane things you're going to be doing.
We'll see. Yeah, it's no, I enjoy it, and it's I say again, a selfish pursuit has led to something that I feel can add value to other people's lives. So I'm going to keep doing it because it was something that I was missing when I was struggling. So we'll crack on. But no, thanks again.
Mate. Thank you.